If you were ever taught to give feedback by sandwiching criticism between two compliments, you were taught wrong. And it's not just ineffective, it's actively making your team worse because your people figured out this trick years ago. And now every time you compliment them, they are bracing for impact. So you didn't build a feedback technique, you actually built a warning system. Hi, I'm Matt Jertson, and 4 years as head of training development at SpaceX and over a decade as a military instructor pilot in the US Air Force taught me a lot about feedback. I've trained people in environments where vague, softened feedback doesn't just hurt performance, it actually creates safety risk. So in this video, I'm going to show you exactly why the commonly called shit sandwich fails, what's actually happening in your employee's brain when you use it, and a simple 3-part framework that will make your feedback clear, more credible, and more likely to actually change behavior. Just a quick interjection, I wanted to remind you that I run a company called Built, where we train the next generation of hard tech leaders how to build teams capable of solving the world's hardest problems. If you are an aspiring technical leader, an existing leader, or responsible for training leaders in your organization, please check out builtleaders.com to see if we can support you and your team. For anyone who hasn't heard the term, the shit sandwich is the feedback method where you open with something positive, deliver the criticism in the middle, and then close with something positive again. So it's compliment, critique, compliment. It sounds reasonable, it feels kind, and management books have been recommending it for decades. Here's the problem. Your employees already know that this pattern exists. The moment you open with, hey, I just want to say you've really been stepping up lately, they stop listening to your compliment and they're waiting for the but. Their brain has already shifted into defensive mode before you've said anything critical. The opening phrase doesn't land, it just signals that something uncomfortable is coming. When praise is structurally tied to criticism, it loses its independent value. Your employee can no longer tell if you're genuinely recognizing their work or just setting up for a correction. Over time, your positive feedback stops meaning anything, and that's a real cost. So here's what happens cognitively. People tend to remember the beginning and end of a message more than the middle. It's called serial positioning effect. So when your critical feedback is filling in a compliment sandwich, it is literally the position in your brain that is least likely to be remembered. You carefully delivered the feedback, you thought it landed, but it didn't. Your employee walked out remembering the nice thing you said and a vague sense that something was off. When people learn the pattern, and they always learn the pattern, every future compliment from you becomes suspect. They start wondering what's coming. You've created a team that's slightly on guard every time you say something positive. That's the opposite of the culture you want to create. So what do you do instead? Well, it's a framework called SBI, and there's 3 components in it: situation, behavior, and impact. So situation is you ground the feedback in a specific moment. Don't give feedback in the abstract where you have a communication problem. It's just not actionable. It's a character judgment. It puts people on the defensive immediately because there's nothing concrete to respond to. So instead, you anchor to a specific situation, a meeting, a deliverable, a conversation, in yesterday's project review, or on the report you sent Thursday. The more specific the situation, the safer and more credible the feedback is going to feel. The second step is behavior. Describe exactly what you observed, not what you concluded. This is the most important distinction in the entire framework. Behavior is observable. You interrupted 3 people before they finished their sentence. That's a behavior. You were dismissive in the meeting. That's an interpretation. And interpretations trigger arguments. Behaviors open conversation. When you stick to observable behavior, your employee can't really dispute what you said. They can explain the context, they can share their perspective, but they can't tell you that you didn't see what you saw. That's where productive feedback conversations begin. And finally, step 3 is the impact. You tell them exactly what happened because of this situation. This is the piece that most managers skip, and it's the piece that creates motivation for change. Telling someone what they did wrong is information. Telling them the effect it had on the team, the project, or the relationship, that's meaningful. And people change their behavior when it actually means something to them. So when you interrupted people before they finished, two of them stopped contributing for the rest of the meeting. We may have missed input that we actually needed. Now the behavior has stakes. Now there's a reason to do things differently. Put it together, and it sounds something like this. In yesterday's project review, that's the situation, you presented the timeline without flagging the schedule risks we had discussed earlier in this week. That's the behavior. And the client left the meeting with an unrealistic expectation of our actual delivery date. And now that's the impact. No compliment buffer, no softening, just clear, specific, respectful information delivered in a way your employee can actually act on. Notice what that does. It respects their intelligence. It gives them something concrete to respond to, and it makes absolutely clear why it matters. That's what good feedback does. It doesn't make people feel good or bad. It gives them information they can use. The shit sandwich isn't kind. It's avoidant. It protects the manager from discomfort at the cost of the employee getting feedback they can actually use. Your team deserves better than that. And frankly, so do you, because unclear feedback means you'll be having the same conversation again in 3 months. So what's the fix? Situation, behavior, impact. Try it this week. Go try it right now and see what changes. If this was useful, make sure you subscribe to this video. I publish every week on practical leadership skills in technical environments. So if you have any questions or want me to cover anything else, please make sure to drop something in the comments, and I will see you next week.